Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Secrets for an Inspirational Life. I hope that everyone is well and that this reaches you all in good spirits and a good mood, at least. And I'm hoping for better days. Thank you so much for joining me today. And we have a really special guest today. And as I always say, my guests are all special, but this one in particular has done so much work for charity and so many charitable causes, and especially to a charity that's very, very dear to my heart, the Prince's Trust. And this is as I would call him, a very good friend of mine, actually, who has helped me a lot also with regards to the Prince's Trust and his very, very motivational and inspirational attitude. He has also been awarded an MBE for all his hard work. So let me introduce to you Steve Lindsay. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Mimi.
Hi, how are you today?
Yep, fine. Thank you very much. Yep.
And how are things with you? How's life?
Well, it's very frustrating, isn't it? We all must feel that we can't be out and about doing the things we normally do, but trying to keep doing things. Has done quite a lot of contacts with on the phone or using the new Zoom program.
Oh,
So
yes.
trying to keep the momentum going while we're locked down. Yeah.
I know it's not easy. It's been now several weeks, and I don't really know. I was watching today the news with the Prime Minister, but I don't know when this is all going to sort of ease off a little bit. But I have hope that it's going to be not in the too distant future. So I know you're a very, very busy man, and as I introduced you, you do so much for the Prince's Trust, but also you do so much for other people. And please tell us a little bit tell the listeners and share with everybody a little bit about your life and your story, because it is really, I have to say to everybody, I'm amazed at this man. I really am. The amount of things that he does for other people is absolutely incredible. So please, Steve, share with us.
Well, you embarrassed me, Mimi. I don't think of myself as anything special.
You are,
Although
you are, for sure, for sure.
but I do recognise that I wouldn't have been able to be so busy and get so much satisfaction from the things I've been doing. Was it not for my wife, who is very much likes to be in the background and has supported me tremendously over the years. We've been married 47 years, so a long time. And she, I think initially I didn't realise how the role she was dropping into, but certainly I know now how much support she's provided in the background. So my first credit has to be to her for her support.
Well, that's wonderful, because you know that old adage and that old saying, behind every successful man, I don't
Absolutely.
know, whether I'll get into trouble now for saying that, but it doesn't matter, because, I think we all need somebody there as a backbone in our life to be
Yeah.
able to follow our dreams and to do what really we can do to pursue our heart's desires. So tell us a little bit about your work and how did you get your MBE, and a little bit about you know your your inspirations and your passions for life. What keeps you going?
Well, I'll try. Maybe. Um, I was very fortunate. I had a career in banking, which gives you a certain amount of confidence, prestige, if you like, almost. Certainly confidence to deal with people and situations. So, with that background, when I was a junior manager in Luton in the late 70s, um, my boss at the time got an invitation, I think, from Prince Charles to say we're forming the Prince's Trust. We want to set up a committee in Bedfordshire. Would Barclays support this initiative? And the manager, the senior manager at the time, said to me, Steve, I'd like you to take on this responsibility to represent the bank and get involved in this charity. So off I went, and I very quickly felt very comfortable. I'm very motivated by the work the trust was trying to do, and despite the fact the trust has changed many times in 40 years, as you can imagine,
Yes, I can believe.
I've been happy to go with the changes and support where I can, really. So it's been a real passion of mine for over 40 years.
And what sort of thing do you do within the trust, Steve?
Okay. Well, with the banking background, they felt I could be most useful by supporting startup businesses. And we've done that in many different ways over the 40 years. Initially, it must have been hugely challenging for the young people we were working with. Um, this was a committee of senior businessmen at the time, and they were interviewed by this group. It must have been a fearful situation for them.
Yes.
Um, and they talked about their plans, and we gave them grants, we gave loans, soft loans, and provided mentor support right from the early days. So the three main planks have stayed consistent throughout the whole life of the trust, but the way we deliver the support has changed dramatically over the years, and I think we're much more understanding. We're much more structured. The support is pretty comprehensive now, and I'm still very much enjoying it. So it's the business. It was I think, can't remember what it was called. No, that's right. It was called, the trust actually had a different name. It was the Prince's Youth Business Trust uh,
Oh, okay.
in the early days, and then it
Hmm.
was all absorbed under the Prince's Trust umbrella, and we now call it the Enterprise Program.
Okay, the enterprise program. And what is that all about, Steve? For people, the listeners that don't know about it, what does the Prince's Trust do?
Okay, well, for a lot of people, self-employment is perhaps the only option, or it's the option of choice,
Right.
uh, particularly if I mean, ignoring the current situation. If you
Yes.
haven't done particularly well at school, and your exam results weren't great, and you haven't got a very impressive CV, then perhaps setting up your own business might be the way for you. And we've always seen it as an option for people who perhaps don't do well in an academic sense, although the brush is quite wide now. But it's always been to support those young people who've got some sort of disadvantage in life, and need to find their way in a different route. So self-employment has been the main thrust,
Hmm.
um, and we've been looking to make sure that it's not a wild pipe dream, that it's based in reality, and therefore certainly now, the young people who come forward for that program, and we're still running the courses, and we're going to be doing them online, of course, in the coming weeks, but they were face to face until recently. Um, they were doing 4 days of I was going to say chalk and talk, but certainly face to face events. We've been supported in the county, and we now work in a wider region, by many large businesses. And in fact, Ernst Young provide premises for us to run the course. Um, and we take people through all the aspects of running your own business. And the people running those courses are either volunteers like myself, or paid employees of the trust.
So it is really from the basics. And I know that the youngsters come from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of personal problems and issues. And you actually guide them all the way through.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I talk on the course, and then I meet them at various stages while they're planning their business, and I chair the panel that reviews their business plans before we sort of press the go button, and provide either a loan if they need one, perhaps a grant, but very importantly, Mimi, the mentor relationship. So an experienced person who will stand by them, be there to answer questions and support them, and that support lasts for 3 years. So that's a huge commitment,
It's for
actually.
3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's how many, do you have any people at the moment that you're mentoring?
I'm working with one young man at the moment. I won't give his name, but
Mm-hmm.
he's a young man who does have some mental problems,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think he would settle in a job, but he has a passion for music, and he's got some skills at recording, and he seems to be able to organise events, because he ran a series of musical events in a pub, where he was providing the artists and all that sort of thing. So he certainly has some flair in that area, and we're helping him set up. I suppose you'd call it an agency for musicians, where he would look after them, arrange their bookings, arrange their recordings if that's where they're going, and hopefully sell some discs. So we're
That
working with him at the moment. Yeah.
so that's what you're doing as well. I know you told me a story about someone that you helped that was sleeping rough,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
was that was quite an encouraging story, I have to say. And even to this day, I think about it because I think,
Mm.
well, if somebody can do that, the work that you do, Steve, and change somebody's life completely, it really deserves recognition. Tell me a
Well,
little bit about what happened with this young man.
yeah, the young man concerned, it left a marked impression on me, Mimi. We run various sort of introductory sessions, um, and people are invited to come along. And I guess he would have been referred by perhaps the drug agency or the unemployment service. That we work with all those organisations. And anyway, I went to a meeting. It was held in the Quaker Hall in Luton. Perhaps a good place to have that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
each young person, there was about 8 or 9 young people at that particular session, were talking about their lives and what they were doing. And this chap, aged about 22, 23, told the most amazing story. He'd got in. His mother was a drug addict, so he'd lived with drugs at home all his life. They'd fallen out, and he was sleeping in a car park. I mean, it's pretty awful, isn't it?
It is. It is. I remember it. This story stuck with me.
It stuck with me, Mimi, and
Mm.
he told me about that he was getting what they call universal credit, or one of these, government things,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd he'd had a relationship, got a young child, and he was giving all the money he got to the young lady who's got the child, and I think he was popping in occasionally to check and make sure they were okay. So he had, I don't know, £20 or £30 to live on a month. I mean, really nothing. Um,
Abysmal. Mm.
a dreadful situation.
Mm.
He had got a habit of smoking cannabis, which we won't approve of, but you perhaps needed some sort of.
It is as it is.
Uh,
Sometimes you've got to do what you have to do,
right,
although
right.
not the best solution,
No.
but
And of course, in that situation, it's almost impossible to get a job because he didn't have
of
a
course.
home address.
Mm.
Although I think he was using his mother's address for some communication. But anyway, no. So we sat and we chatted for a long while, and I was really delighted to hear a few weeks later we financed the trust, financed getting him a passport, because he had no means of identification. So
I love this story. I
yeah,
just can't, it's amazing story.
well, so when he went, for a job, he couldn't even prove who he was. Anyway, so we have been providing passports for people in this situation for a while, actually. Anyway, we got him a passport, and I was delighted. I couldn't believe, but later on, I don't know, a few weeks later on, 4 or 5 weeks later on, we heard that he'd got a job with the local authority, working on the bin lorries, and that's a huge step forward. Regular work, regular income.
Yes.
He could start to look perhaps for renting a place or something. It was that first step back to normal life, and I was so pleased to hear it for him.
It is beautiful. I remember you telling me this story, and I was so, I don't know, it was, even though I don't know this young man, it seemed so heart-wrenching that you had been able to put somebody, you know, on the ladder of life again,
Yeah,
because we can all
yeah,
walk through the shadows of life. I always say this, but sometimes all we need is just a helping hand.
yeah, yeah. Yes, I mean, we have this. Princess Trust provides its support for young people using various programs, and one of the ones is small cash awards, where it moves people forward in their lives. One time we were providing quite a lot of laptops, and we had a supplier who would give us a laptop for 150 quid, and people would come to us who'd been accepted on courses at college and that sort of thing, but their parents and themselves, they just haven't got the money to buy the laptop, and you can't really do a course at a college without a laptop nowadays.
That's
We have
right.
to
That's
accept
right.
that's the way of the world, and so we were providing laptops which enabled people to take up the places that they'd got at college. Small amounts of money, very targeted. We don't give them the money. We always buy the thing. I remember
Hmm.
uh, a chap who had been out of work for a long time and finally got a job, but he lived at one side of Luton. The job was the other side, and he wasn't going to be paid for a month the usual way. How was he going to get to work for that first month? And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
bought him a bus season ticket so that he could get to work for that first month. And again, it's a small amount of money relatively, but it got him over that problem and enabled him to start work. And that's what these small awards are targeted at.
But they make a huge
Absolutely,
difference, you know.
absolutely.
It doesn't, it's a small award, possibly it looks like a small award, but
Mm.
that enables him or her or whoever to transform their life.
It does, yeah. We formed a little committee locally, and the Princess Trust people would get the applications, and they were presented to us once a month, and we went through them and approved them. And yeah, some terrific stories and some great situations we could help with.
And how does it make you feel? Because I know, Steve, you're involved in other things. I know you're involved with the Scouts and other types of charity work that you do. What what inspires you to do this? Do you sit at the end of the day and say, Steve, I've done this and I feel good? What is it that keeps you motivated to keep going?
Well, it sounds a very sort of pat answer, but it is the young people.
Mm.
When you know that you've helped somebody move forward. Um, just the other day, Mimi, a young lady was referred to me who had been unemployed since last summer, so 9, 10 months.
Okay.
She was autistic, a very bright girl. When I spoke to her and saw her CV, and I thought, this girl is amazing. Surely she can get a job. And
Mm.
we sat and, well, I mean, I haven't met her because obviously we can't meet at the moment. But we talked on the phone, and I thought, this girl is so full of energy. Surely she can get a job. And we talked about it, and we talked about how she might discuss herself at an interview. For a lot of young people, the interview process is quite daunting,
Yeah.
and I think that had worried her for a long while. Anyway, we chatted for an hour or so one evening, and I thought, well, perhaps it's helped. I don't know. And I was so pleased. She phoned on Saturday night, about 8 o'clock at night. My wife and I were sitting down, and she said, "I've got to tell you, I've got a job." And
Oh,
I was just amazed. It's a job cleaning. It's at Asda, the supermarket, but it's a full first step back, isn't it? And she was over
absolutely,
the moon, and I was
absolutely.
so pleased for
Oh,
her. It's only a few days. It's only a part-time job, but
doesn't matter.
and
Doesn't
she was
matter.
genuinely full of joy about it. And yeah, that little instance, yeah, that's what drives you.
Did that give you a little bit of
Yeah.
a
So I had a buzz
smile?
at the
And
weekend about that. Yeah, I was really pleased for her.
it's amazing. As I always say to you, your work astounds me, and you have this incredible amount of energy that even when we've met, I've been tired just from listening to all the stories that you do, because you do so much, so
Well,
much,
anyway.
so much. And I know that you help other charities as well, and you're called upon as well to help other people.
Well,
But
go
tell
on.
me a little bit about your MBE. I have to ask you because it's a wonderful achievement.
Well, uh, I'm embarrassed in a way. I don't think I deserve,
Don't be shy.
but
Just
it
tell us.
was a lovely thing to happen. Um, yes, I suppose yes, it was in recognition of the work for the trust. It's over 40 years. Um, I didn't know it was going on, the recommendation or anything like that, but apparently the trust, some people in the trust, senior people in the trust, made the recommendation. I understand references are taken to make sure you're sound, because one of my
Yes.
friends in scouting said he'd had an inquiry, so they do check you out. Um, and what happens is that this was in the Queen's New Year's Day honours list a couple of
Mm.
years ago, and the process is really nice. I got a letter from David Cameron, who was obviously the Prime Minister at the time, saying that he was minded to recommend, I think were the words, to Her Majesty that get this award. And because that's the point at which you can say yes, I accept the award, or no, I prefer not to. So that's your chance to.
So you have a
You do have a
choice whether
choice.
to
Yeah, yeah.
accept
You
it or
get a letter in about
not.
November time. So obviously it was a sort of secret that I had to keep, um, apart from my wife, from family and friends, and of course, then on the 1st of January, all the names are released, aren't they? And they're all printed in the paper and all that sort of stuff. So yes, it becomes public knowledge on the 1st of January. And then at a later stage, you get invited down to the palace to receive the award. And there are hundreds of people get these things over a year. So they do them in lots of different sessions. Anyway, so you get invited to go to the palace, and that's really lovely. And you can take two
Mm.
guests, and it was nice. Both my sons could come, so that was nice. The three of us and my wife were invited, and it was Prince Charles who was on duty that day, and
Mm-hmm.
it's superbly organised. They make you feel special. They brief you what's going to happen. Your guests sit in the big hall in Buckingham Palace, and you're in a sort of ante room, and in due course your name is read out, and by a very stern official, and you walk across in front of whichever royal it is, and they've got the award, and somebody has sort of whispered in their ear who you are.
Right.
Yes,
Discreetly.
and Prince
Mm.
Charles said to me, well, obviously, congratulations, and he said, will you be continuing to work for the trust? And I said, yes, I will, as long as they want me to. I'm very happy to do so. So we had a little word, and then you sort of bow and off you go. And then afterwards, everybody leaves together, and all the photographers are there, and you have your photograph taken and all that sort of thing. And then we, as a family, we went out for a meal. So it was a lovely day. Yeah.
I think it's a memorable thing, and I think so well
Well,
deserved. And did you feel differently about yourself? You know, some people, when they receive awards, is it just, do you the next day just get up and, I don't know, go shopping and it's normal? Or do you think to yourself, well, actually, Steve, I've got
no,
this
no,
MBE
no, no,
going on?
no. I'm embarrassed really, and I don't. I mean, you get a wonderful certificate signed by the Queen, and and you, and you have. I
Beautiful.
have been invited to a number of events in the county
Hmm.
and that sort of thing afterwards. No, but no, everyday life carries on the same, doesn't it? Really. Yeah.
It does. And I know that you're a very family orientated man, and that gives you a lot of pleasure as well to be around your family. Would you say that it is your family that inspires you?
Um, well, I think they keep me grounded. I think that's probably they
Mm.
make sure that I'm know what's going on. I think I'm really lucky that we've got teenage grandchildren, and that they teach you things about what young people are thinking and doing. So it helps me with my work actually, because otherwise you, as a senior citizen now, you would lose touch with what young people are thinking and doing. And it's lovely that my grandchildren keep me up to date, if you like.
And in the loop,
Exactly.
so
Yeah,
to
yeah.
speak.
So I am grateful
Yeah.
for for what, and it helps me with them, because the experiences that I have with young people, I can relate to them better, so we can be closer, and we have a good understanding, a good relationship, particularly with the teenage grandchildren.
It's a good way, isn't it, to build
Yeah, yeah.
relationships. I think understanding somebody from whatever age is one of the main things in any relationship, is that
Mm.
understanding and the respect for each other. And this is something that's really difficult in the world right now. I think because of all this that has happened, with the current events, I don't know, but I don't know about yourself, I feel that people have become more understanding and somehow are willing to listen more
Yeah,
to each
yeah,
other.
I'd agree. I think people are much more tolerant of diversity nowadays, and that is so important. You and I have talked a number of times, and I really enjoyed those conversations. And
Thank you.
no, I
Me
have.
too.
And
Me too.
I think that I think I said to you the other day, the thing that really I've learned, and I think is so important, is not to prejudge youngsters. Um, that they do have more pressure than young people had 30, 40 years ago. There's a lot of pressure on young people nowadays on a
For sure.
whole
For sure.
range of ways. Social media has put pressure on them, their behaviors, the way they look, what they do with their lives. Um, yes, it's much harder being a young person than it was when I was a young person. Life seemed quite straightforward in those days. It's certainly not now. So,
No,
I
it
think if,
isn't.
if
Yeah.
we as the older generation, or can be patient and understanding and supportive, then that's our role, really.
And I know that you've traveled quite a bit, Steve, um, to some places you've told me about. Have you got any plans once this is all over? What are your sort of aspirations or goals? What would you like to do? What is the sort of thing that you'd still want to do and you haven't done?
That's a good question, actually, Mimi. I suppose if you say what's in my bucket list, I would like to go to the Far East, Vietnam, somewhere like that, Cambodia, and just to experience their lifestyles, before they change. I did read a book, and someone said, look, you've only got the next 5 or 10 years to go to these places, because by the time, if you leave it longer than that, they'll be very much like everywhere else, because the world is, quite conforming in many ways. Big cities are everywhere,
Yeah.
aren't they? Tower blocks and all that stuff. And the real different features of countries are disappearing. And I would love to go to those countries. Whether I'll get the opportunity, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, the uniqueness of every culture.
Exactly.
It has a lot to be said for that. And I know also on my travels, and I'm sure on yours, the more you travel, the more your heart and your soul opens to other people, and you have a greater understanding for people. What gives you that understanding, do you think? Not to prejudge people, but to really be so accepting of everybody, do you
Well,
think, Steve?
I think you can see it in a lot of those sort of that you call them the third world economies. I spent some time in Nepal, and they're such a happy people. I know it's a great generalization, but they give off a real feeling of warmth and friendliness, and yet they have so little in possession terms. And I can just, as a
Yes.
little instance, we did a trek, and we finished the trek, and we were having the sort of last meal on the trek, and that these Sherpas were cooking our meal, and we had a few beers, and sort of saying goodbye, really. And that I think they were earning, this was about 10 years ago, they were earning £2 a day to be a Sherpa. That's how much they earned. And to a Western person, that's clearly a very small amount. And what we did, all our surplus clothes that we brought to Nepal with us to do this trek, we put them all in a big bag, and we gave them all our spare clothes at the end of the trek, and they shared them out. So,
Oh my goodness.
T-shirts, shorts, trainers, or whatever they were, and they were delighted. And
Yes, I'm
and
sure they
and they,
were.
well, I'm not trying to be clever or anything like that, but it just showed the gulf in wealth terms between the Western individual and people from these countries. We finished the trek. We took in a coach or minibus back to Kathmandu, and the leader of the trek, who was a very experienced Sherpa, would then have to walk home. And I said, well, how far? He said it's about 40 miles. So he had to walk home to see his family. And then when he got another trek to run, he would walk back to Kathmandu and join. And you think, well, this is amazing, isn't it?
It's incredible what
Yeah.
people do, and the power of this human spirit, which I love these stories, Steve, and especially, you know, how to overcome adversity. But people seem to have this innate gift of survival. Even us, I say even us in these times, in the United Kingdom. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we were saying how happy we were when we realized, and this is just like, it sounds crazy, that we found a carrot in the fridge. Because I know it's mad, but he said to me, he runs retreats and this, and he said, I was so happy to find this carrot, because it's so difficult to get food now. And it's this gratitude, maybe it's this abundance of gratitude that makes them
Well,
different.
they were certainly one of the most friendly people I've ever met. And yet they have so little in material terms. We went to a school halfway up a mountain. The only way of getting there was to climb up the mountain. There was no roads. The school had no windows. It had a tin roof. They had bare desks and forms, no books, no paper. And you've never seen such happy, content children. Unbelievable.
And that remains in
Yeah,
your
you'll never
heart, I
forget that.
suppose,
No, you
for a
never forget
long
that. They made
time.
us so welcome. We knew we were going there, and we'd taken bags of pencils and pens and rulers and all that. And we collected those in England, and we took those with us and left them at the school. It made a difference for them. Yeah.
Again, we're back to the thing of these what seemingly are small acts of generosity are actually, make the biggest differences. And Steve, I'm so happy, and thank you so much for coming onto the show. What advice I really would like you to share with us, the advice. These days have been difficult for the whole world, and for some people more than others. And I know that each of us somehow has our own suffering, our own, sorrows and adversities. And even the people who seem the most happy is really, we really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. What advice would you give to people to not give up, really? What's your advice, and something that you have used and that has worked for you?
Well, that's a really hard one, Mimi. I think at the end of the day, life is about making the most of it, isn't it? It is. There are lots of reasons why we should be depressed and fed up and angry, perhaps. But at the end of the day, life is what you make it. And I would say to people, be positive, do what you can to help people, listen to people, talk to people, and just do what you can. And it sounds a bit bizarre, but the only thing I want people to say when I go and I finish my life, people to say he was a good chap. Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
The only thing that matters in life is your reputation. Everything else is doesn't have any value, really. And I'm always conscious of that. I would like people to think he was a good chap. That's all.
Well, I'm sure everybody will think that, including myself for sure.
Well, I'm not so sure, but
Absolutely.
I hope people do think
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Steve. We've had Steve Lindsay, who has done amazing work and continues to do absolutely phenomenal work for other people, giving people the chance to change their life for the better. And that's something that really more of us should strive to do, especially in these times. And I think that maybe anything that is worthwhile is, if anything is worthwhile that's left, is the love and the care and compassion for another human being.
Here.
But thank you so much, and thank you, Steve.
Thank you for asking
again.
me, Mimi. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yes, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you, and thank you all of you again for listening, and I look forward to being with you again in the next show. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Secrets for an Inspirational Life, brought to you by your host, Mimi Novic. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast, and see you in the next episode. For more information about Mimi Novic and her books, music, and inspirational work, take a look at her website, www.miminovic.co.uk.